Welcome to a special edition of the Athletic NBA show here live on YouTube. I'm your host, Andrew Schlecht. With me, I've got Anthony Slater. And Slater, we are talking about the Oklahoma City Thunder. You wrote a piece that is on the Athletic right now that you should go check out about just a Thunder offseason review. Slater, what's up, man?
What up? How are you?
I'm doing great. We are... Summer League is ending today.
The finish line. And I call it the finish line in the NBA. The finals are not the finish line, right? The Summer League is the finish line.
No, if you have conversations with people that aren't super into the NBA, they're like, hey, your job should be nothing right now. You're right. And you're like, actually, it's going to be everything until after Summer League is over. And we are finally there. We're going to talk a little bit about the Thunder, who had a pretty eventful Summer League roster. Had some action at the NBA draft, and just generally are a team that people are starting to have more interest in. And I think that people kind of struggle with how to think about the Thunder in terms of their trades and maybe what they should do. But let's just start with Chet. We both got to watch Chet in person in Las Vegas. What were your just impressions of the way that Chet looked physically, which I think is kind of the number one question that I had?
I mean, to me, the way he went after shot blocks is the best sign that he's not at least playing tentatively, right? I mean, there was some crashing falls, some high pinned blocks on the backboard where somebody's kind of undercutting him and he's crashing to the floor. Then he's getting up and strolling down the floor. That is probably what you're looking for most, right? It's beyond just, he says the foot feels fine. We can't be in his brain and know how, if it feels the same. But the fact that is how he's operating on the floor and moving around with reckless abandon in a lot of ways tells you that, I believe him. I believe that the foot feels fine. I do think there's rust in his offensive game. I think, and we can get to where I think there will be growing pains. He's similar in my mind to Wembanyama in a lot of ways. I think he's going to be way ahead defensively and just a force defensively early. And I think the offense is really going to take a while. But that's kind of what I saw.
Yeah. And the offense is going to take a while, partially because they're both really skilled. And Chet, and you saw this with Chet and Wemby, just their ability to get to their dribble drive moves is really tough in the league, because teams know you send an early double to them and you just get up in their grill and the ball is just going to squirt out. It's just going to be gone. And that happened to both those guys throughout Summer League. And I think it's going to take time. Just because you're 7 feet tall and or over 7 feet for both of them, and you're trying to
want to be guards, right? They want to be guards. They grew up as guards, I think. And you have two organizations, and we'll get to this, I'm sure, but the Spurs and the Thunder that are playing the long game, where you don't need Chet to just be hey, just be in a box this season because this is what we need from you. Just like with Wembanyama, they're not going to just, if he's turning over 5 times a game, they're going to be whatever, we're going to lose 50 games and have a good pick. That's fine. So they're going to let them explore what they can and can't do, which is probably not great for next season, but could be, spectacular for 4 seasons from now.
Yeah. And the Thunder are in an interesting position because they already have 3 players that you can put ahead of Chet in the pecking order if you wanted to, just because of their experience with SGA, J-Dub, and Giddey. And I think the dynamic between the 4 of those guys is going to be really interesting. I think those are your 4 starters plus Dort.
Well, what do you expect there? Because, Chet at Gonzaga played with good players, and he isn't just absolutely ball dominant where he can't spot up and hit a 3 and, kind of play off ball, but he's going to want his touches, right? Yeah. And I think in a lot of ways from a developmental standpoint, the Thunder want him to, like I said, explore some of that stuff earlier. But you just mentioned it. All NBA guard, emerging wing, Jalen Williams, and then, point guard who Josh Giddey kind of needs to be on the ball at times for him to be relevant on the court, right? He's not you don't want him spotting up in the corner. So how do you feel that tug of war going, especially because, like it or not, they're kind of going to be in the playoff mix and their main players are going to want to win games.
Yeah, people don't know what to think about Giddey. And I think a lot of people don't even realize what his counting stats were last year, that he was 16, 8, and 6, shooting 52% from 2, 32% from 3. The 3 numbers aren't great, but the guy improved a ton. He went from 26% from three to 32% from three. And he scored 16.6 points per game. Like, that guy's not just going to give all of his shots to Chet. He wants to get better. He wants to show that he's worth a max rookie extension too when it comes for his time. And I think he's going to make some strides. I mean, he's still one of the younger players he was one of the younger guys in his draft class. He's still going to be one of the younger players in the league next year, only about to turn 21. I think people are sleeping on him a little bit. And so I do think what those guys will do is just create the easiest shots ever for Chet. I think we could see some like crazy efficiency numbers for Chet because he's going to get a lot of dunks. He's going to get a lot of wide open shots. The Thunder haven't played with a target like this. They've had all these like really good passers and these guards that can kind of get downhill and can contribute in a lot of ways, but they haven't had this like finisher like Chet is. I mean, Chet in college finished over 70% in the restricted area. Like, that guy is going to get a lot of wide open shots, a lot of dunks, and is going to contribute at a high level. And I think a lot of it is because you do have these like very intelligent players around him.
Yeah, it doesn't seem like he takes like awful shots either, right? Just like those, let me try like a 12-foot turn hook now, or, bumble into traffic and throw one super off balance. He does seem like his shot diet's pretty sharp. But one of the stories I think for them in the early part of next season will be lineup combinations though, right? Because I mean, we know how kind of loaded they are with young talent, but it's also, how do you fit it all in? And if you do want Giddey to still have a lot of opportunity, like, probably stagger him with Shea, have him do the non-Shea minutes. What lineups does Chet make most sense with? How often do you want Chet playing the 4 just from a physical, you just probably don't want him getting beaten down too much. It sounds like, he's going to start at the 4, or I mean, he's going to start at the 5 in a smaller lineup with Jalen Williams coming off the bench, but you probably want them playing together a lot too. So I think that's Mark Dagnall's like main early season job. Like, there's so many cool young pieces and tools. How does it fit together into a smart rotation?
Yeah. And I think the answer is they won't have a true rotation in like the traditional sense, is that they're going to cycle guys in and out. I mean, they acquired Davis Bertans. I think Davis Bertans is going to wear a Thunder jersey. I think he's going to play some games here and there.
A Thunder warm up or an actual, on the court jersey would be.
I think he's going to get in the game. I think he's going to get in and play. Aaron Wiggins is another guy that
is he
yeah, he can get the cows. He can get the I mean, for sure. I think Isaiah Joe's going to play. Kendrick Williams is another big piece that got hurt that's going to play. I mean, they got a lot of guys.
They do, but I'm sitting there with like Bertans. Like, I'm like, you're probably like the 15th best player on this roster at this point.
Yeah, I'm interested to see how they kind of balance all this out.
Yeah, no, I mean, okay. I mean, and we can get into the direction of the franchise a little bit, but how about just the roster spots? We talk about this offseason review being over. They got to slice some people off. I mean, my expectation would be Rudy Gay, probably a buyout candidate. Oladipo, probably. Bertans, I think, is part of the reason you think Bertans might be around is because he technically has 2 more years on his deal. So he could be a trade weapon into next summer.
Yeah, because he's only guaranteed $5 million next year as long as he plays less than 75% of his games, which he will.
If Davis Bertans is like a 78 game player this year for the Thunder, that would be.
Let's go ahead and just slap a guarantee on that one. That's not happening. They're going to have to get the roster down. I think it will be a combination of the guys that you said. They just acquired Ty Washington and Usman Garuba. They're going to take these guys into camp. You can carry 21 guys through camp. And the Thunder did the same thing last year where they maxed out the amount of guys that you can bring into camp. They'll do that again, and they'll see honestly, they will give everybody an honest chance to make it, including those 2 guys that were first-round picks by the Rockets. But I would have guessed those 2 might go. I guess Jeremiah Robinson Earl is probably on the chopping block as well and could become available for a team.
Like, this is the type of situation where agents start to get involved, right? You could say, hey, look, we want to load up as much young talent as possible into the training camp and, let them fight it out. But a lot of times, especially with former first-round picks that do have talent, right, that believe, hey, if I'm on this roster, I think my guy could be the 7th man on that roster. Like, there's going to be a little push and pull because, And again, I don't know this to be the case, but does Ty Washington's people and Usman Garuba's people want them to sneak in as like, a non-rotation player on the Thunder, or is it better to explore elsewhere? But it's almost, it's first world problems, right, that they're kind of having, but they're overloading this roster with, by the way, 4 first round picks coming next season.
Yeah. It's there will be good players that go through the Thunder that don't make it onto the roster that are going to go play somewhere else. Like, it's going to be the process. Sixers did this. Like, they've been through this, and there were good players that went on to play for other teams just because they just didn't have room for players. Like, that is definitely going to happen.
And it's a little bit of what I wrote today. Obviously, they're taking, and we can turn this into like bigger picture on them, but they're taking this patient approach that it's very in contrast to the Rockets, which is what I wrote, which, especially you go back to that Chris Paul, Russell Westbrook trade, which in a lot of ways is the origin of a lot of this. But I can understand it this summer, but at some point a consolidation trade has to come because of what we're discussing. And like, where are you, like, just how soon do you think that that's possible? I mean, could it even be by the deadline?
I would be surprised if it happened this year. I think the Thunder will wait until they kind of see this group kind of declare themselves like really in the mix in the West before they make a move. And I think they want to see what they need too. Like, you can predict what this team might need, but if you make that prediction, you could predict wrong. I mean, a lot of people point to like Siakam as a guy that the Thunder could or should be interested in. There's a lot of reasons why they shouldn't be interested in. One, his contract situation, like, he's got a year left. He could just walk if he wanted to next year. Like, he could just be a rental.
And he's signaling like that he doesn't really want to extend either.
Yeah, you don't want to get yourself in that mix. But if it was a player like that, I'm not sure they know. I mean, they could go through this whole season and discover that really Chet is probably better off playing the 4. I'm not sure if that's the case. But if you go through 82 games and he plays 65 and you're like, oh man, like, he's getting beat up and we're not sure that he's got like the strength to do it, they may be better off going and getting a skilled big rather than going and getting another forward. So they just don't know what they need yet. It's kind of my point. And so my guess is that maybe as early as next summer, they look to package. I mean, they've got, I think it's 35 picks in total, including seconds, that they could use. They're going to use them at some point to go buy the things that they want. They're going to use these picks as currency at some point, and they're going to attach a player, whether it's like maybe Usman Jang is not like able to develop as quickly as you'd want, and maybe he'd be a player that a young team that has like similar to what the Wizards have had to do, and you had like not that it's Beal, but a player like in a Beal situation might want to come to the Thunder, and then they can give like Usman Jang, or maybe if it's like a really big player, maybe it is Josh Giddey, maybe it is Jalen Williams that go in a trade like that. But yes, eventually a trade will come for the Thunder where they're going to use their picks to fill in the gap of whatever they need most. And I think this next year, maybe 2, will be used to kind of figure that out.
Stuff is just breaking so correctly for them too. I mean, I just even look at this Houston pick where Houston obviously this summer was like, they're obsessed with like, they need to try to make the playoffs. I think in a lot of ways, there's people trying to save their jobs in Houston.
Yep.
But the fact that it's a top 4 protected pick, it's a little reminiscent when the Warriors had the pick that became Jonathan Kuminga that they got in the D'Angelo Russell, Andrew Wiggins swap.
Exactly.
The Wolves wanted to be very good.
They
tried to build a roster that included D'Angelo Russell that was good enough. So it was like, they weren't going to be embarrassed by being at the bottom of the standings and maybe giving up the 5th, 6th pick. But the reality was, no matter how hard you tried, you still weren't that good in the crowded West. I still don't think the Rockets are that good. So I just see Houston playing themselves into like the 7th or 8th pick and then handing that to the Thunder.
Yeah.
And then maybe you have that. You have, what is it, Utah's, I think it's top 10 protected.
Top 10 protected, yeah. And who knows?
The Clippers unprotected, which will probably be 20 range, and their own. Like, it's not that great a draft next year, but I just like, gosh, the type of assets they have. The funny thing is, like, look, you'd have to talk to Damian Lillard, and this is not how the NBA works. It's not fantasy sports where you just trade without egos being involved and all that. But like, they could throw a package on the table that like would drop Portland's jaw right now. That would be considered like a fifth of their war chest. It's crazy.
Yeah, they could. And I think, and it wouldn't, obviously it's not going to be for Lillard, but there could be a player that comes available in the next like 3 years that is just like, yeah, I'm done. And the Thunder are still going to have like 10 first rounders to deal and these young guys where like they could get in the mix for like, I don't know, like if Giannis, wanted
baby,
to
he
look
threw the
elsewhere.
Giannis name out there. That's high level.
I'm just thinking like they have the chips. They have the chips though to go after like a really big name when somebody comes available. Maybe it's not
it
Giannis.
Seems on the surface you think like they've never really, in a lot of people's opinions, done it. They're not a free agent destination. The Paul George trade was huge, and that was risky, right?
Yeah.
Paul George gave no, commitment, obviously long term, and then ended up signing long term, and then ended up getting traded, which, but he spent 2 years there, so they've done it. Is the only thing. When Sam Presti has believed the window is now. And I think the main overarching point of, I guess, what I wrote today, but generally the Thunder's offseason is like the time is not yet. It's not time to hit fast forward, even though, I mean, there are a lot of people like, man, they could be really fun next year. They could kind of get in the mix a little bit more if they really wanted to, but it's like it's just not time yet.
Yeah, no, it's not time. And they could also be in a position in the next 3 years where it's like Giddey and J-Dub and Chet and Shea are just meshing together really well. And those are their guys too. And they use their picks to go get role players to fit around them. And they could also do what they did with this pick with Denver this year, where they just take a pick from this year and attach a second and get a pick in the future and just like continue to like push their assets out forward to win. Like, they don't know, like, we know we don't need these picks now, but we can trade with a team that's good now. And the odds of Denver or, I don't know, the Sixers or the Bucks or teams like that being good in 2030 are pretty low. And so you just kick those picks out later, which I would expect the Thunder to do that. They have flexibility, I guess is my point. It's like they could go the route of like trying to like go superstar hunting in the next 3 years, or they could be satisfied with the roster they have, do something like Denver did, where they do like an Aaron Gordon type trade for like your third or fourth best player and like move forward like that. It just really depends on like the development. And a lot of it is like going back to the beginning of our conversation, Chet. Like if Chet can be like a true like second best player, or if he even like reaches his like true ceiling and he's like the best player on the Thunder, then I think that they might be okay and don't have to like go superstar hunting.
Yeah.
So a lot of it really depends on that to me.
Yeah. And the good thing for them about Chet, the idealized version of him, is a number two that doesn't clash with Shea, right? Yeah. It's like a rim protecting stretch five who could, who has some skill in passing. But if the best version of Chet Holmgren is still a 17 points per game player, but he's 3-4 block shots, he's defensive player of the year type capabilities, he's extremely efficient, like that's a perfectly capable number two, especially on a loaded roster. And then the question is that I would have said no to before last season is like, can Shea be a one on a title team? And I always thought, projecting forward, like they still don't have that in the cupboard, like a number one lead guard to win a title. Is the answer might be yes on that one, which like that one came out of nowhere. I think even to them a little bit.
Yeah, I don't think you would have had anybody projecting that he'd be first team All NBA last year. I mean, it's insane. I mean, I don't even know that you could find like the biggest homer in OKC that would have said like, oh yeah, for sure, SGA, first team All NBA, and like he earned it. I mean, he was that good. And he continues to get better, and he's super focused on becoming like the best player he can be, just like a lot of these guys are. But he continues to just kind of ratchet it up a little bit more every year. And so I'm intrigued to see what he looks like this year. And I think that Chet could unlock a lot for him as well. He hasn't played with a big like Chet that could play in the pick and roll, that could pop out to three, that can roll in the rim and catch a lob. Like he hadn't played with anybody like that. So I'm very interested to see how those two play together. We've seen like Giddey play with him last year in Summer League. We've seen J-Dub play a little bit with him in Summer League as well, but we haven't seen what it looks like with SGA and Chet. So I think that's going to be really interesting. That particular duo in Oklahoma City.
Yep. I think that this season, what would you say? Like first round, like almost if you were to compare to the Durant era, it's like that Lakers first round series they had where it felt like a mini arrival. And then they trampolined off that. It almost seems like that this season is the hope, you might say.
Yeah, I mean, if they can be in a first round series and like truly be in it, like they were against the Lakers, I think that you feel good about it. Like they don't need to win a round or whatever, even if they were in the play-in again and like lost a tough one just to get into the play-in. Like I don't think that you're completely dissatisfied, especially with how crazy the West is. But my expectation would be getting to round one, getting in the top 8, and making a series of it. So, and I think that's doable. I don't think that's a crazy expectation.
Well, what is kind of crazy about the West, and I know we always frame the West as this just like gauntlet, so many good teams. My opinion, it's just a lot of average teams, and there's a crazy amount of parity. And certainly, look, if the Thunder have injury trouble, if any team has injury trouble, or if they disappoint a little bit coming out of the gate, like sure, they could be in danger of being the 11th seed. But also in this type of West, if they're a little bit better, if Chet's a little bit more ready, especially defensively early on, like you'd be like the 4 seed, and suddenly they're favored to win a round. I mean, that's how, in a lot of ways, in my opinion, average the West is.
Yeah, I mean, look what the Kings did last year. Like it's not like some superstar team, but like it was a good team, but they're like second in the West. Like that's not your average like second in the West team, from year to year. I do think that there's going to be some surprise team that's going to be in the top 4 that we're just not thinking about. I think the Thunder are definitely a candidate for that, just because they have, with the age of their roster, they have a pretty high variance of where things could go.
And also, and we can wrap it here, and also because they don't like want to be in a lot of ways. That's what's almost funny about it, right? There's not this like, let's go chase it vibe. They're almost just kind of moving that direction. As I think Sam Presti would say, organically, right? This is being done quite organically.
Yeah. Well, I mean, you wrote it. I mean, they used a ton of cap space just to acquire a bunch of second round picks. And that tells you exactly where they want to be.
Or moving up to like what do you think of the Case and Wallace? Like just 2 spot, like they must love Case and Wallace to go from 12 to 10 and take Bertans was one of the worst contracts in the league.
It's a bad contract. It's truly only 1 year because it could be $5 million next year. But I think they really like Kaysen. I don't know who would have moved up for him, to get him at that spot. Maybe it was Toronto that was trying to move up to get him. And so some of it's that, some of it's just you go get your guy, and ownership's like, yeah, cool. Like you can absorb his contract and it's fine. It was a clean deal. They didn't have to give up any picks, but they did have to pay a lot of money to move up 2 spots. I think it's fine, but I do think it's
if he's
fair
good, it's worth it. If he's good,
you need Kaysen to be good. Yeah, you need Kaysen to be good. And in 2 years, if he's awesome, then no one's talking about it. Nope. If he's not on the Thunder anymore, I think we're talking about Davis Bertans again, kind of like we talked about Kyle Singler for years and years and years.
Well, don't stretch Bertans, or else you can really talk about Bertans for like 7 years.
They just got done paying Singler this summer, so
that's why they went and got Bertans. I get it now.
They're trying to carry on the tradition. Thanks so much for tuning in to this edition of the Athletic NBA Show. Stay locked in, and please go read Anthony Slater's piece on the Thunder today. Thanks so much for listening.